I choose you, the Retroid Pocket Classic. And so this little device can play most of the retro games that you would want to throw at it. And since it is, first off, look at that gorgeous screen. In person, this looks a lot better. The Retroid Pocket Classic is a handheld that's supposed to go alongside the traditional, more Retroid Pocket handhelds. And this one's going to be more 16:9. You can play pretty much any console on here, whereas this one's going to be a little bit cheaper, and you're going to be able to play like an actual Game Boy, like when you were a kid. This is definitely geared towards the millennial audience, hence the original Game Boy color scheme. So this handheld basically can play most things that you would want to throw at it, such as PSP, PS1, and below. I think N64 even too, but it can sometimes struggle a little bit with N64. To my knowledge, I haven't actually tested it too much on that. I was mostly actually playing the 2D games because that is what I wanted to play on this handheld because I have the Pocket 5 and the Legion Go for more advanced games. But I always felt like having the Legion Go, even though it could play all the handhelds, all the consoles and stuff like that I would want to play, having something like one of these to actually throw in my pocket, although this probably wouldn't work for that, or just have it in my backpack and be able to pull out a simple retro game is really nice. And on the Pocket 5, I've actually been playing like PC games, so it's almost bridging the gap the other way around. Whereas something like this or the Battle XP that I have right there, these kind of fit that void that the retro gaming, I mean like retro, such as Super Nintendo, Game Boy Advance, and even PS1 and N64 are super retro nowadays, which makes me feel a little bit old because I grew up with N64, but like also GameCube games. And be able to play these types of experiences on the go using this 4:3 screen versus having that 16:9 screen. I wish I could have done a more in-depth review of this before I part ways with it because I am trading it again today. But I think that having games, I think one thing that was actually really cool was AM2R. So that was something that I thought, since it's on Android, that makes a big different experience. You can actually install a lot more than you could on the Linux handhelds like that one. And so being able to games like this, just natively on the device, that's super cool. I accidentally muted my mic. I was trying to show the audio of AM2R. And I mentioned that the audio is not really the greatest on this device because it is, I think, only one speaker here, at least front facing, unlike some of my other handhelds that I've had. And so I think like the Pocket 4 Pro was downwards facing, and that was kind of bad. But it has all the ports that you need, like USB, aux, the SD card slot. And one thing I was mentioning before I realized that my mic was off is that it has Android on it. And it makes things so much easier to just install these games and play these different games versus having to deal with Linux. I think that Linux caused me a lot of strife when it came to just trying to set things up. Whereas Android, yes, you don't want to use Google Play services for privacy, but let alone also the processing power. You want to squeeze as much power as you can out of this device. And so being able to play games upwards of like GameCube, maybe even a little bit of early Wii and stuff like that is nice on a handheld you could just bring with you. Now, I am not going to give you a really in-depth technical overview of what's in this handheld. I just wanted to give you a feeling of what it was like to use and what it's like in the hands, because it does feel like an old Game Boy. The plastic actually feels nice to it. Having enough buttons that are clicky, not to mention like comparatively to other handhelds, this is actually very satisfying to actually use. The D-pad is actually really good. So if you wanted to try to play some fighting games, you could, especially since you have the buttons for some of those games from the Sega consoles. So if you want to get this one versus the 4-button layout, I think that this is worthwhile for a lot of people. Yes, it is 90 degrees, and so sometimes those creases can feel a little bit iffy on the hands, but I didn't really notice it too much because I'm mainly using the back, and that has the rounded edge. So being able to use this handheld to play those retro games, I think that is what's kind of nice about it. Now, compared to the Battle XP where it's only $40, this is about $120. I wouldn't just throw this in my pocket, despite the fact that it's called the Retroid Pocket Classic. I would still feel kind of like I want to protect this, put it in a case or something like that. And that makes things a bit less of a viable option for you to take with you when you're going places. Although I think that being able to use this versus having a Pocket 5 or a Legion Go is a nice choice, because especially if you like the portrait way of the handhelds versus the horizontal, I think that causes a nostalgic feeling of playing that Game Boy like you were in bed. Now, granted, I barely played the Game Boy Pocket. I hardly ever touched the actual original Game Boy. I was more of a Game Boy Advance person, so I was used to the horizontal, but I did have a regular Pocket as well at one point. I did have the experience of playing it vertically, but it's not, for me, it's not as nostalgic. And so that's why I'm not necessarily super keen on the vertical handhelds. This is more mid-range compared to the cheap one there, or Shimui Brick, which is on the other end of the spectrum, more expensive. I think this is going to satisfy a lot of people when it comes to that. So while I'm not affiliated with Retroid by any means, I definitely probably will hopefully have affiliate links in the future I can put in here. So I'll put a link down to this down below, but it's not an affiliate link just yet. But again, go look at Retro Game Core or something like that for a more in-depth video.